Okay. All right. Hello. I'm Saul Hansen, and just checking in with these different videos to back up, give more information on the campaign and the background behind the story. So this one is specifically for the question of should a man write a novel or a story that has all female protagonists and an all female cast? Like, is a man qualified to write a story like that? Especially in a woke society and with all the political correctness going around. So, I wanted to address that and address how I address that. So, when in kind of polishing and figuring out the premise before I really started to write a bunch of pages, I called up my mentor and was like, hey, like, this is pretty much an all-female cast. So, how am I going to do this? Or, you know, like, like I'm not a girl. So like how, I don't have a lot of experience in that way. So how's this going to work? And he's like, what can I tell you, man? He's like, just do the best you can. And so I was like, all right, well, I want to get a little bit creative on this, on how it's going to work. So I thought about how actors do a lot of different things, and a lot of kind of creative things, and so I was like, well, I'll try doing something that makes it as realistic as possible. And so I was like, let's base the three main characters in this story, because there's Zoe, and she's the main character, and then Emerus is her best friend, and she's just below that, and then there's like a tertiary supportive character named Brian. And so for all three of those characters, I'm like, I want to base those on three people. I'm like, okay, and they need to be believable. And so years ago, I coached a cross country team, and there was a young lady that I got to know in on that team that I coached, and that was 10 years ago now. And so through the years, we've kept in contact. And at one point, we were visiting one time and talking about personality types, and we discovered that we have like the same personality type. And so just in talking about things, I was like, man, like, had I been born a girl, I would be her. And so that's something that I kind of pinned down years ago, and just a thought about that. So when I thought about this, I was like, wait a minute, let me base this character Emerus on her, because then I can interview her and I can base this character on her, and then I can take artistic liberty and freedoms on things I would do because we're so similar. And so that's what we did. And so so a friend of mine, her name is DJ, and we visited and talked a lot. And so Emerus was based primarily on her. And then to do the main character Zoe, I was like, man, like, I really need to be able to get to know this character really well. How am I going to do that? I'm like, well, I'm just going to go for low-hanging fruit. I'm like, I'm going to base it on my wife. And so that way, if I, need to ask any questions or things like that, then, I'll ask her. So that's how I was able to get like personal insight. And then for Brian, I had a college roommate who I love, and just wonderful, wonderful guy. And so I asked Brian, I'm like, hey Brian, I'm starting a new story. I want to base a character on you, but I want to use your name even on the character. Like, I want it to be a lot of things you would do. And he's just like, I love that. It sounds like a blast. And so at different points in the story, I would call Brian and be like, okay, Brian, all right, these are the stakes. This is what's going on in this scene. This is what all the other characters are doing. And this is what's going on. I haven't written what happens next. What would you do in this situation? And he would tell me. He'd be like, oh, given those situations and, that, like, I would do this. And I'd be like, sweet. And then I would take that and I would write it into the story. And then I'd go to, the next part. And asking those questions to my wife and to DJ and Brian made it extremely challenging. I can't even tell you how challenging it made to make the story work by incorporating things that they said and did. It made it really, really hard, and probably influenced why it took so long to write. But it was really, really great. And taking all those things, and I think that in the long run that it did make it a lot stronger. So that's how I approach that, and writing a book that has characters where the main characters are a different sex than mine, and it ended up being a total blast, and it was also really fun. Is my wife has read it. She said that it's like, this is my favorite book that you've written so far. This one's definitely the most fun, and it's just really really fast. So the way that it reads is you get to know all the characters, and the way my favorite kind of books is where you get to know what everybody wants, and you kind of know what everyone's expectations in the story, and then once you know them, that's when things really speed up. And so as soon as things take off, the whole story is just kind of like a rocket and just gets faster and faster and faster all the way to the end. So anyway, for those of you who are wondering how to write a book that has protagonists that are a sex other than yours, that's a possible way in how to tackle it. And you may not want to do it the same way that I did, but on this one it worked really well, and I think that I would use the same tactic or the same technique or strategy on any sequels as well, because it ended up being super collaborative and super fun, and made it really fun with my wife and those two friends working on the story together. So anyway, hope you all are doing great, and have a good night.